Welcome back to Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Krayden. Nice to see you all today, although I don't think we have a large crowd waiting, but it's building by the second here. Lots to discuss before we go to question period. The members are doing their SO31s right now, or member statements as we all know them. Want to discuss a few things with you, have a couple of clips to show you, but wanted to emphasize our stickers today because we haven't had a lot of action in the store lately, not a lot of merchandise sold. Please, I encourage you to have a look, see if there's anything there you like. I think it might be worth your while. I'm going to show you a little potpourri of some of the stuff we have available. And I think it might be, like I say, worth your while. And I also want to discuss the WHO pandemic agreement while we're having our little tete-a-tete here. And before it slips my mind, and it will, please watch my interview with Tamara Leach. It was on at 9 o'clock this morning. I talked to her yesterday. It's a good interview. And every time I do these interviews with Tamara, this is my third or fourth one, YouTube suppresses them. Of course, she was banned from X for the longest time. She's back on X. She's meeting freely now with Chris Barber, her good friend from the Freedom Convoy protest. So that court order was lifted. We talk about that. We talk about a lot of things that are happening in our life. Talk about fundraising. We talk about how the Ontario government has seized and continues to have seized millions, $5 million in fundraising that was raised for the Freedom Convoy. We discuss that. We discuss her feelings about Justin Trudeau talking about freedom and violating the Charter of Rights, the hypocrisy behind that. So please watch the interview. It's doing okay, but it's not doing as well as it should. And that's unfortunate because I really enjoy doing this. I want to show you some stickers here. These are all original stickers. In other words, we make them ourselves. We design them ourselves so that we don't take these from any template. This was actually based on a broadcast I did. And of course, the Trudeau one, wacko, that's what got Pierre Poilievre in so much hot water. And here we are, Disco Steve Guilbeault. We haven't got the picture from Saturday Night Fever, or what's alleged to be Stephen Guilbeault in Saturday Night Fever. And it's another one. T-shirts. Yeah, I think while it's still legal, I'm going to wear that T-shirt today. I completely forgot. And that's another one of our favorites is it's on farmers. We support farmers here at Stand on Guard. We support farmers to not have to pay the carbon tax and not have to have ridiculous fertilizer regulations so they can't grow enough food to supply to Canada and the world like they always have. And here's our resolve to resist mug. Why don't you wake up to that every morning? Resolve to resist with me. We're resolving to resist together. And it's very important. I want to show you a couple of clips here. This was perhaps the most bizarre interaction from question period yesterday. And I want you to have a look at this because this is strange.
Leader of the opposition.
Think that you pay down debt by borrowing more, that you stop inflation by printing money, and that you fight the drug overdose crisis by legalizing hard drugs. So at least they're consistent in their irrationality, Mr. Speaker.
True.
But now they've been forced to backtrack right before the election on their legalization of hard drugs because Canadians are revolting against the policy. Today, we have a motion that will be voted in the House to permanently ban hard drugs. Will this government vote for that motion, or will they admit that they plan to legalize drugs again after the next election?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader is wearing more makeup than I am today. Now, I think it's wonderful.
I'm going to ask colleagues.
What the hell did that mean anyway?
Order.
What is she suggesting probably of
I'm
it?
going to ask the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, to withdraw that comment. We don't comment on the appearances of members. The Honourable
What?
Deputy Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry, I withdraw that comment.
Star. Because she apparently was referring to literal makeup. I know it. She then went on to say, well, I think Pierre Poilievre is a real phony guy. And that's what I meant by makeup. No, she was talking about literal makeup because the speaker clearly said she was making a remark about his physical appearance. And Freeland did not deny that. She withdrew the remark. Now, why do you think the speaker made a case in point of that? Because he's sucking up to the opposition, because he did it again. That was the basis of our report yesterday, wasn't it? The basis of that report was that Greg Fergus again violated the nonpartisanship parameters of his job. He put out an advertisement saying Poilievre's policies were all screwed up. They were impoverishing Canada, whereas Justin Trudeau and the Liberals were taking us into a shiny, wonderful new world. And that's not appropriate if you're the speaker, even if it is a riding event where most of the people are going to be Liberal Party supporters, perhaps even members. It's not appropriate. No, he did it again. And a lot of people are saying it's 3 strikes out. It's actually 5 strikes now. He's done this 5 times where he's violated the trust of his job. He's indicated he can't be nonpartisan. So it's time for him to go. Let's hear what Freeland and Trudeau had to say about this.
Yet another example today of Speaker Greg Fergus engaging in partisan events. When does the list become too long, and at one point is it too much for Speaker Fergus to stay in the job?
Our government continues to have confidence in the Speaker.
Greg Fergus has come under political attack again today from the Conservatives. They say a partisan message appeared on his website. Your party has now apologized for that, said it was a mistake. So I'm wondering, does this episode in any way shake your faith in Mr. Fergus as Speaker? And do you think it makes it harder for him to do his job?
No, it doesn't shake my faith at all. I have full confidence in Greg Fergus as Speaker of the House of Commons, as a thoughtful, independent-minded leader. The issue was dealt with, was addressed by the party and by the House Leader. It was an unfortunate mistake. No. It was not addressed for the House Leader. What is addressed for the House Leader? You take it off the website, you take the advertisement off the website. That's dealing with it. Obviously, this guy doesn't learn his lesson. He doesn't get it. He doesn't comprehend what he's doing wrong. He says he does. He says he understands. He says he comprehends. He's apologized before. He doesn't get it because he's hopelessly partisan. He's hopelessly a subject of Justin Trudeau. He was his parliamentary secretary. Clearly, he doesn't get it. And I don't care if Freeland still has confidence. She still has confidence in herself, for God's sake, and that's totally misplaced. Justin Trudeau, yes, he's got confidence in him because they're good friends, and he was his parliamentary secretary, and he wanted him in there. And the only reason he wants him in there, it's race-based. Because that's the first thing Justin Trudeau said, is that how nice it is that this man is not white. That's not a qualifier for the job. I don't care what the color of his skin is, whether he's black, white, brown, or yellow. He should be able to do the job, regardless of his ethnicity, regardless of his race, regardless of his ethnic origins. And anybody of any race can do this job if they can do it in a nonpartisan way. Greg Fergus can't do that. And as bad as Anthony Rota, his predecessor, was, he did that job in a much better way. And of course, he was left holding the bag for Yaroslav Hunka, the former Waffen-SS Nazi, who was invited to the House of Commons. But Justin Trudeau played a role in that too. And Rota was the scapegoat. Rota was the one left hanging in the wind over that one, because Justin Trudeau always rolls the bus over the people in his caucus and his cabinet. And so that's what that was all about. But Fergus needs to go. There's no question about it. Before we go to question period, I want to touch briefly, and I'm going to be talking about this again tomorrow, on the World Health Organization pandemic agreement. I will wager anybody out there right now that we don't hear a single question about this again today during question period. We haven't heard a single question since I have been covering this event live. We haven't heard a comment, a statement from the government about it. We have no idea where it is unless you start digging yourself, which is what I had to do. I put out a broadcast on this last week during the lull in Parliament and was shocked to discover, that this thing is up for ratification in June. Yeah, we have 4 weeks now, literally 4 weeks of Parliament, of the House of Commons sitting before they have a recess for the summer. Is this treaty going to be mentioned in the House of Commons? No, it won't. And I don't see any political will from any of the parties, including the official opposition, to raise this issue. Now, there was one MP on the Conservative side, the former leadership candidate, the current infrastructure critic, Toronto area member of Parliament, Leslyn Lewis, Dr. Leslyn Lewis. She actually put out a referendum on the United Nations. She actually has addressed this issue, asked Canadians how they feel, asked her constituents how they feel. But you know what? I reached out to Leslyn last week and I said, this would be a wonderful time for you to come on my show and to talk about the WHO pandemic agreement. And is there anything we can do to stop this? I know it's been watered down a bit. If you watch Redacted, they've been talking about this. And I hope you caught me on Redacted yesterday, by the way, talking about CSIS on Gone Wild, Gone Woke, but that's beside the point. But yes, the WHO has actually watered down the agreement, but it's still insidious. It's still odious. It's still bad. It's still going to overrule, subsume Canadian sovereignty, and it's got to be stopped. So what response did I get back from Leslyn Lewis's office last week? Well, Leslyn is so busy with infrastructure issues, with talking to people about infrastructure, with dealing with your critics' portfolio, that she hasn't got time to talk about the WHO pandemic treaty, and she hasn't got time to talk to you, Mr. Krayden. She's booked solid for weeks. How nice. Do I think Leslyn Lewis has got a big sock in her mouth, courtesy of the communications department of the Conservative Party of Canada? Yes, I do. I can't prove that. I can't verify that. But I've worked inside that party. I've worked inside the House of Commons. I know how these parties work. And I know how the Conservative Party acts in opposition when it's on the verge of becoming government. It starts to silence its members. It starts to say, don't say anything. Don't talk to the media, especially friendly conservative, small c conservative media that are apt to give you a fair hearing, because you might say something that we don't really want to say right now, and it'll be in print, it'll be broadcast, it'll be on the internet, it'll be on the radio or on television, and we really don't want the controversy right now. So don't say anything. Don't do the interview. Don't talk to Mr. Krayden at all. And I'm afraid that's what happened with this. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I see some action from Poilievre on this file. But I tell you, I was worried about something he said about CBC 2 weeks ago, about Radio-Canada, about supporting Radio-Canada. How can you support Radio-Canada and defund the CBC at the same time? I don't know. I need to see clarification on that. Because like I tell you all the time, I'm not carrying water for the Conservative Party of Canada or its leader. I have great respect for Mr. Poilievre at times on positions he's taken, and obviously I think it's going to form the next government. But that doesn't mean I'm going to sanction everything it says or does. I will never be in that position again. That's why I'm an independent journalist. Anyway, thanks for listening. Let's go to question period.
They're once again
waiting for here's one of the blockheads
to be forced
justifying
to bear the
euthanasia in
burden
this
of winning
country.
their
These people are
in courts.
nuts. Absolutely
Today,
nuts.
with the support of the Collège des médecins du Québec, the Quebec Bar, the Chambre des notaires du Québec, and a number of associations, we are once again calling upon the government to allow Quebec and any other province that wishes to do so to go ahead with advanced directives. To the people who are suffering and to Ms. de Montigny, we shall not abandon you. Never will we abandon you.
The honourable member from Peterborough, Kawartha.
Today's report from Food Banks Canada is shocking, jaw-dropping, and sad. Almost 44% of the population are spending more than 30% of their income on housing. The Liberal NDP government is failing Canadians. When that much of your income is going to housing, if you can even find housing, there is barely anything left for other necessities like food. 2 million people a month are accessing food banks in Canada. 1 in 3 of those visitors are children. Canadians are doing everything that is asked for them. They're going to work, they're paying outrageous taxes, but they still can't get ahead. Why? Because that Prime Minister spends, and then gaslights Canadians, tells them that Canada isn't broken and that everything is great. Canada and Canadians deserve housing and food they can afford. Conservatives will restore that grade from an F to an A, and we will bring it home so that everybody can afford to live. Yeah.
Oh, better put my mic back on.
Member from Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, last week I had the honor of attending the high-level meeting on antimicrobial resistance at the United Nations in New York. As a director of UNITE, an international parliamentary organization for global health public, antimicrobial resistance on AMR is one of the top 10 global public health threats to humanity and causes more than 5 million deaths per year. Political leadership is essential for raising public awareness. It must work together to combat AMR. This is why the Government of Canada established a PHAC AMR task force and provided an important multi-year funding commitment of over $28 million in 2021. This government recognized the need to continue supporting research efforts in budget 2024.
Yeah, by the way, folks, please like the station while you can. We need to boost these numbers. We're on the verge of 25,000 subscribers. Let's achieve that this week. Please help out as much as you can. Tell your friends and family. Let's get these numbers up.
Oral questions.
There we go.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. After 9 years of debt, taxes, and inflation from this Prime Minister and the Bloc, Canadians are hungry, literally. According to the Food Bank Report of Canada, 50% of Canadians say that they are in a worse situation than last year. 1/4 of Canadians have to use food banks for young people. How come the PM is forcing Canadians to feed their obese government when they can't even feed themselves? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, it'd be more credible from the Leader of the Opposition if he wasn't opposed to our food school program that will help 400,000 children across the country to eat better with school programs. We are here to invest and to help families, while the Conservatives are only offering cuts and austerity, Mr. Speaker. It's the same thing in terms of our investment in dental care that have allowed almost 100,000 seniors to have access to dental care free of charge. And the Conservatives continue to be opposed to this. We are here to help with affordability.
Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, his plan for the full school program has provided no meals, 0 meals. It has just created red tape and not helped children. And in terms of austerity is what the 25% of young Canadians that have had to use food banks over the past 3 years are already experiencing. The 50% of Canadians who are worse off than last year are also experiencing this. And the 25% of them that are in food insecurity know what austerity is. It's austerity for Canadians. The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, once again, we see that the Conservatives are just trying to benefit from challenges that Canadians are facing. They're trying to score political points. But when it's time to vote on investments that will help families, like our school food program, or more daycare spots, or daycare, $10 daycare across the country, or dental care programs for seniors, they vote against these programs, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, it's just
They
a
are
fatuous
proposing
liar.
government austerity and not investing in Canadians who are in need. We believe in economic growth and investment in families in need.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister's taxes, debt, inflation, and promises, Canadians are hungry. Literally, according to the Bank of Canada, the Food Banks Canada report, 50% of Canadians say they're worse off than a year ago. 25% are in food insecurity, and a quarter of young adults went to a food bank in 3 months alone this year. Why is it that Canadians who can't feed themselves have to keep feeding his morbidly obese government?
Thank you, happy-go-lucky, for the gift. Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Speaker, it would be slightly more credible to hear the Conservatives concerned about the challenges Canadians are facing if they hadn't stood and voted against more spaces in childcare, voted against our dental care program that 2 million seniors have signed up for and has now delivered close to 100,000 dental appointments for seniors in just 22 days, Mr. Speaker. They've also stood against our school foods program that's going to help 400,000 more kids across the country have full bellies as they start their school day. These are investments that they're opposed to, that we are there to help Canadians with.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it's a school food program that has not served a single solitary meal, even though it was promised 3 years ago. What he's feeding is bureaucracy, not children. And if all of his spending were working, then why is it that Food Banks Canada reports today that 25% of young adults had to go to a food bank in 3 months alone, and 2 million Canadians are lined up every month? Mr. Speaker, with so many empty stomachs, isn't it just a little bit wacko to be raising carbon taxes on farmers?
He said wacko again. Did you hear that? He said wacko. He's going to be ejected for that.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we announced the National Food School program in the budget, and just after question period today, the Conservatives have an opportunity to vote in favour of that National School Food program and other initiatives that are going to help hundreds of thousands of kids across this country, and indeed millions of Canadians with the high cost of living. But he's going to stand there and vote against it, Mr. Speaker, to prevent it from delivering the help Canadians need. We will keep going on delivering support for Canadians, and we will keep going on putting more money in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians with our Price on
repeating
Pollution
those lies.
that supports Canadian families and successfully fights
Stop,
climate
boy.
change.
Stop repeating the lies.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He's been making exactly the same promises for 9 long years, and yet his NDP Liberal government has doubled housing costs, doubled the debt, increased the size of the bureaucracy by 50%. Now he wants to quadruple the carbon tax, all to deliver 2 million people to a food bank every single month. Mr. Speaker, if government programs were really going to solve the problem he caused, then why are Canadians so hungry?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, here's a perfect example of where the Conservatives stand. They stood and voted against our dental care for seniors program. As of today, over 2 million seniors have signed up, and in the 22 days since May 1st, close to 100,000 seniors have gotten free dental care. That's in just 22 days. On a program that he voted against
I think Trudeau just woke up and came to question. But you notice how the tie is askew.
We will be there to
His
invest
hair
in
isn't
supporting
combed.
Canadians with a national school food program.
He looks like he
with
just
dental
woke
care,
up.
with more childcare spaces, despite him voting
This
against.
is a man with substantial personal problems. There's no question about that.
The honourable member for Belleuil Chambly. Mr. Speaker,
Oh, yeah.
the Liberals say
Blockhead-
they're interested in
blockhead time.
French in Quebec and in Canada.
And they're back
but
to
the
French in
Liberals
Quebec.
are
Yes. My God, make
gradually
it sick
paying
of
for
hearing this.
the disappearance of French in Western Canada. Moreover, they're mobilizing hundreds of unilingual Anglophone members to protect their Liberal colleague. Does the Prime Minister really want Francophones to believe that it's out of love for the French language that they are flooding the Association of French Francophone parliamentarians? Mr. Speaker, Francophones across our country, including those in Quebec, know full well that the Bloc is not interested in the future of French outside of Quebec. That's why they want to make Quebec their own country to protect French. But we understand that the best way to protect French in Quebec and across Canada is by investing in all communities
What a
who speak
lame
French
argument.
across the country to protect French in Quebec. Yes, we're there to do that, but also to continue to stand up to protect Francophone minorities across this country, and we're going to continue to do so. The honourable member for Belleuil Chambly. That's not true, Mr. Speaker, but the best thing that could happen to French in Quebec and in Canada and across the world would be an independent Quebec. However,
The best
Mr.
thing
Speaker,
to happen to the House of Commons would be get rid
what
of
did
you.
the Prime Minister say during the English debate in 2021 when I was the only one who wanted to talk about Francophones outside of Quebec in English, and I was told I wasn't allowed to talk about French in English at the English debate in his country? The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
You shouldn't have even been
Mr.
there, you
Speaker,
halfwit.
in that debate, like in all debates and all possible opportunities, I always stand up to defend the French fact in Canada and to defend Francophone communities across this country. I've always done so, and I'm going to continue to do so. Defend linguistic duality and
You
both
see how
official
we
languages in
waste
this country
time in this
across this
country?
country is what I've done.
Talking
It's
about
the Liberal Party of
useless,
Canada, and
worthless
for our Liberal
issues
government,
like
we're going
this.
to continue to do so at every
There's
opportunity
no
we have.
problem for the French language in Quebec. And if it survives in the rest of the country, fine. If it doesn't, that's
isn't
fine
content just
too.
ripping off Canadians when they buy their groceries. Now they're teaming up with Rogers and Bell.
And you're teaming up with Metro because your brother works there, and you want to have a boycott of Loblaws because you have a conflict of interest, you fathead.
Colleagues, it's
God, I'm
important
sick
that
of
we're able to
Jughead
hear
thing.
the questions that are being asked as well as the answers. The honourable member from Burnaby South on the top, please.
Sure. I know the Conservatives don't like when I take on corporate greed, but Loblaws isn't
You are
content
corporate
just
greed,
ripping
you
off
bloody
Canadians when it comes to the
hypocrite.
groceries. Now Loblaws is teaming up with Rogers and Bell to rip off Canadians with their cell phone prices. We know they're going to limit choices, and limiting choices means higher prices for Canadians. The Prime Minister promised to lower cell phone fees, they're sky high. He promised to lower grocery fees, they're sky high. When will the Prime Minister finally stop greedy CEOs from ripping off Canadians?
Chris, this is an excellent comment here because you believe we have 2.7% inflation in this country? What BS?
Decrease across the country by 25% over the past number of years, and we're going to continue to stand up for Canadian consumers. And indeed, I know the minister is looking into the Competition Act to see if there needs to be referred on a number of things that have come forward. But we're going to continue to stand up for the middle class and people working hard to join it, which is why we raised corporate taxes, why we asked the wealthiest Canadians to pay a little more so we can invest more in younger Canadians, why we're continuing to step up on creating fairness for every generation with this budget, with the investments we're making, and with further investments as well.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Power to stop these greedy CEOs, but you do.
It's not enough to be ripping people off at the grocery store. Today, we've learned that Loblaws is teaming up.
Didn't you just say this? Oops, I'm reading the wrong talking point. Yes, he's reading the wrong talking point.
Colleagues, I know it's Wednesday and everybody is a little bit more primed for action, but it's really important for us to hear the.
Well, what happens on Wednesday for you, Greg? Do you consider resigning?
The honourable member for Burnaby South. From the top, please.
Power to stop these greedy CEOs, but you do. I know the Conservatives don't like it, but we got to take on corporate greed.
It's not enough for Loblaws to be ripping people off at the grocery store. Today, we've learned that Loblaws is teaming up with Rogers and Bell to block competition from other companies in their stores.
He just asked that
This
question.
means less choice and higher cell phone bills. The Liberals are sitting on their hands. Will the Prime Minister finally stand up to the CEOs and support
like watching a rerun.
A full investigation into these allegations? I'd like to benefit from this opportunity to remind all members that when they'll be asking questions and there are answers.
Trudeau has never said he would control
they
spending.
Go through the chair, please.
He said the spending would take care of itself.
Thank you very much,
the
Mr.
deficit
Speaker.
would take care of itself.
The member knows full
That's
well
what he
that
said.
We did make improvements to give more power to the Competition Bureau because we know that it's by ensuring competition amongst the various companies that Canadians will have better results and prices. And we also know that's important to continue to do follow-ups on these issues, and that's why the minister is asking the Competition Bureau to look at what's
grocery
happening
shopping
in terms of
tonight,
cell phone packages and Loblaws.
Like
it's a challenge we're always going to take seriously.
After I watch the Jackson, I'm going
Mr.
grocery
Speaker,
shopping.
normally the NDP leader is well worth ignoring, but I just can't help myself. He says that the Prime Minister acts like he has no power to stop all of these greedy CEOs from ripping off consumers. Who else has the power? Well, the guy that joined the government 2 years ago. He's been in power during the worst food price inflation in over 4 decades. Will the Prime Minister agree with me that his carbon tax coalition is nothing more than an anti-competitive price-fixing scheme that is costing Canadians at the grocery store?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, we see that the Conservative Party's opposition to the price on pollution is ideological and not concrete, because their opposition to the price on pollution means they don't care about fighting against climate change, even as wildfires are already raging in different parts of the country. They have no plan to fight against climate change, and they do it in the name of affordability while ignoring that the Parliamentary Budget Officer actually showed that 8 out of 10 Canadian families do better with the money put in their pockets from the Canada Carbon Rebate than it costs them with the price on pollution.
Moron. Yeah, follow those forest fires. All caused by climate change. Not a scientific basis for it.
Concluded that 60% of Canadians
pay
more in carbon tax costs than they get back in the phony rebates. 100% of middle-class Canadians pay more than they get back in the phony rebates. And now the Prime Minister wants to quadruple the tax, all at a time when he's preparing to hand over power to carbon tax Carney. Will the Prime Minister confirm if carbon tax Carney will follow through on his plan to hike the tax to 61 cents a litre?
This is Mark Carney, of course.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Officer has confirmed that 8 out of 10 Canadian families in jurisdictions where the carbon price federal backstop applies do better off with more money in their pockets through the Canada Carbon Rebate checks that land in their bank accounts 4 times a year. That's money in their pockets that goes to the cost of groceries, the cost of rent, the cost of everything they need to raise their families. That is money in their pockets that the Leader of the Opposition would take away because of its ideological crusade against climate action.
And I have Shefton.
The Honourable Leader of
Keep
the Opposition.
repeating the same lines. I say this
Wacko
every day.
carbon tax obsession is costing Canadians not just at the pump, but it raises the cost of home heating, of groceries, because of course, if you tax the farmer who produces the food and the trucker who ships the food, you tax all who buy the food. It's a housing tax because it raises the cost of building materials that go into homes. With the report out today that 25% of young people had to go to a food bank in just 3 months, will he accept the common sense Conservative bill to take the tax off the farmers who produce our food?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition continues to make that argument, even though he knows full well that farm fuels are 95% exempt from the price on pollution right across the country, Mr. Speaker. That is something that he ignores because of his ideological opposition to take any action in fighting climate change. Well, Mr. Speaker, I can tell you, in Conservative ridings right across the country, people are worried about droughts, people are worried about floods, people are worried about wildfires that are more and more severe.
No, they're not, because they know it's got nothing to do with climate
change, which is something he hasn't put forward, while we are fighting climate change and putting money in people's pockets.
Oh, liar. Incessant liar.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's carbon tax applies on barns, on grain drying, on fertilizers, on off-farm vehicles. It costs literally tens of thousands of dollars for many individual farmers, all of which gets passed on. But the Prime Minister, instead of defending his taxes, resorted to a really wacko and unhinged claim that if Canadians just paid more taxes, there would be suddenly less fires. I thought that water and not taxes put out fires. But maybe the Prime Minister can clarify, how high would his tax have to go for forest fires to stop?
Good question.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are facing the impacts of the extreme weather events that come from climate change that are unfortunately getting worse and worse every year. That is why our government from 2015 onwards has stepped up in the fight against climate change, because not only are we reducing Canada's emissions to the lowest level outside the pandemic in 25 years, but we're also stepping up in the jobs and technological innovations that the world needs to successfully fight climate change. We will continue to fight climate change, Mr. Speaker, and put more money in people's pockets while he sits with his arms crossed and
I'm just sick of hearing about this. You know the weather is not affected by climate change.
He says that his taxes are going to make Canada a high-tech wonderland. Before, his claim was that it was going to stop forest fires. It's him that made the link, not me. Obviously, I think the link between the two is absolutely ridiculous, because his tax is not an environmental plan. It's a money collecting plan. It's a plan of government greed. So I'll ask the question again. He wants to hike the tax to 61 cents a liter. If it gets to that high and people are all starving in the streets, will that stop the forest fires?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in the Leader of the Opposition's desire to make clever rhetorical points, he actually completely ignores the basic facts. The price on pollution is revenue neutral for the federal government. That means the money that comes in for the price on pollution, for the carbon tax, gets returned to the jurisdictions, and is why the Parliamentary Budget Officer found 8 out of 10 Canadian families in jurisdictions where the carbon price applies do better with the Canada carbon rebate that comes in 4 times a year than the price on pollution costs them. That's a plan to fight climate change and put money in people's pockets.
All you do is put your hand in my pocket.
Speaker, I'm sorry to be too clever for the Prime Minister, but he's the one who made the argument that high taxes would stop forest fires, and now he can't tell us how high the tax would go to put all the fires out. He went on now to say that his tax is revenue neutral. Well, you don't have to be too clever to read the government's own published documents, which shows that he has collected $2 billion more in taxes than he's given back in rebates. That's why 100% of middle-class Canadians pay more than they get back. So once again, Will he tell those middle-class people how high the tax would have to go for the fires to stop?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we just saw is climate denialism at its finest. The fact is, as global emissions rise, as carbon intensity in the atmosphere increases, extreme weather events like wildfires, droughts, and floods will simply become more and more frequent. Now, his plan is to do nothing, Mr. Speaker, and let future generations fend for themselves. Our plan is not only to reduce our emissions, but to create the solutions that the world needs while we lead on fighting climate change, bringing down emissions, and growing the economy.
We haven't brought down emissions, and even if we did, it would have no effect on the global footprint because Canada produces 1% of global gas emissions. All farcical.
A new study from the OQLF has established that French as a working language has gone down from 90% of young people to 58%, 64 rather, to 60%. Does the Prime Minister recognize that his linguistic policies are not at all stopping the decline in French and it has weakened it? Or can he address the perverse insults that were made to Quebec scientists? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are the first federal government to recognize that we have a responsibility in particular to protect French in Quebec. Yes, we are concerned with the decline of French that we're seeing across the country, including in Quebec. And that is why we are here to invest, to partner with the Quebec government to ensure that we are protecting the French fact in Quebec and official languages across our country. We're going to continue to be there to defend French, not for political ends like the Bloc is doing, but because it's the right thing to do for our country and our future.
That's why I call them blockheads.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly.
Idiots.
Mr. Speaker,
they just take up
the Liberals admitted that they're responsible, but they've acted in the opposite. They have not supported. They gave money to Anglophones in Quebec to protect them from a French assimilation. If the Prime Minister is so concerned for Quebec, can he stop objecting the Bill 96 in Quebec and allow Quebec to manage its linguistic laws?
It is.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Official Languages Act protects linguistic minorities across our country, and obviously, well, we want to protect Francophone minorities outside of Quebec, and also we have a responsibility to protect both official languages in a bilingual country and to protect all linguistic minorities. And we're going to continue to do so. But it doesn't prevent us from doing everything we can to protect French. It's not the Anglophone minority.
But fart-faced Trudeau, he's just completely out of touch with reality to suggest that Canada has any effect on forest fires with its greenhouse gas emissions. It's just so absurd.
Is not worth the cost of housing, which has doubled. But today, the Parliamentary Budget Officer released a damning report that showed that after the Prime Minister promised he would eliminate chronic homelessness, it's actually gone up 38%, and the number of people living in unsheltered locations is up 88%. This after he spent $500 million on homelessness programs. So if it costs $500 million for him to drive up homelessness, how much would it cost to drive it down?
Wow. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, whether it's the pandemic, whether it was global inflation, whether it was international economic situations, we've seen more and more Canadians suffering, including from the opioid and toxic drug epidemic that the Leader of the Opposition continues to attack and vilify. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we've invested billions in countering homelessness, and we're going to continue to invest in eliminating encampments and supporting Canadians and communities, in vulnerable communities across the country. The Leader of the Opposition solution is to do less to fight homelessness, to invest less in vulnerable people. That's what he's doing when he votes against our current budget.
The Honourable Leader of the
You're a
Opposition.
useless
He
budget.
brags about his billions in spending, Mr. Speaker. People can't live in billions. They live in homes, and his billions build bureaucracies that block those homes. In 2015, there were 284 homeless people in Halifax. Now there's 1,211. Wow. There are over 30 homeless encampments in Halifax alone. 10 years ago, there were 3,000 Quebecers who were homeless. Now it's 10,000. Why is it that the more he spends, the worse things get?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government has chosen to invest to support Canadians through difficult times. We saw it through the pandemic, where we stepped up to put money in Canadians' pockets, money in community organizations, money in businesses and restaurants, in mom and pop shops right across the country, and we came out of it stronger economically. We restored full employment faster than the United States. We know that investing when people need supports is the right way to build for the future. Confident countries invest in themselves. What the Leader of the Opposition is proposing is austerity and cuts to programs at exactly the time that Canadians need them.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Canadians are already living through austerity, according to a PBO report. It has shown that since the Prime Minister promised to eliminate homelessness, it has increased by 38%. The number of homeless people in Quebec has risen from 3,000 to 10,000, Mr. Speaker. Yes, true, he's spending more money, that he's making everything more expensive. But when will he recognize that big government in Ottawa will never end homelessness? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker. No one in this country thinks that a Conservative government that will cut and offer austerity will help fight homelessness in our country. That's not how things work. It takes investment in housing that is affordable. It takes investment in programs to support people who are homeless. It takes investment in programs based on compassion and data to fight drug issues. This is the investment that is necessary, but he's just proposing cuts and austerity while Canadians are suffering, but we are here to invest in vulnerable communities. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Devastating reports in one day demonstrate the NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost. First, we had Food Banks Canada and the Salvation Army that say record numbers are forced to go to food banks, that over half of people are worse off than they were a year ago. And now the PBO says there is more homelessness. There's more homelessness and hunger. He's got three explanations. One, he can blame the rest of the world for his mistakes.
It's
Two,
climate
he
change.
can promise more of the spending that caused the problem. Or three, he can own up and admit that he caused the misery Canadians are living.
Why doesn't he start blaming climate change for hunger and inflation and everything else? Because it makes as much sense.
The Conservative leader likes to going around saying Canada is broken. We choose instead to invest in Canadians, invest in supporting food banks, invest in community organizations that are on the front lines of supporting vulnerable Canadians, investing in the kinds of programs that are lifting Canadians up, like the 2 million vulnerable seniors who are now accessing health care, dental care for the first time. 100,000 people in just 22 days have gotten dental care when the Conservative Party has consistently voted against it and indeed tried to block it both in this House and across the country. We will continue to be there for Canadians.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Lying
Ireland,
SOB.
Spain, and Norway announced that they will soon recognize the state of Palestine. This is a crucial step towards peace and justice for Palestinians and Israelis. But Canada is missing in action. In February, New Democrats asked this government to recognize the state of Palestine. They refused, and they turned their backs on Palestinians and Israelis who are looking for peace and justice in their region. The Prime Minister can take a stand today. Will he join with the consensus of international community and recognize the state of Palestine?
Hear, hear. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we urgently need to build a credible path towards lasting peace. We oppose efforts by the Netanyahu government to reject a two-state solution. At the same time, Hamas, a terrorist group, currently controls areas in Gaza and has not laid down its arms or released its hostages. We are prepared to recognize the state of Palestine at the right time, not necessarily as the last step along the path. We were pleased to be able to support the NDP motion of a number of months ago. We will continue to work forward on promoting peace and working towards stability in the Middle East.
The Honourable Member from Nunavut.
Last week, I met with the Tumikulut Saipakivik daycare in Iqaluit, a daycare that provides culturally appropriate care in Inuktitut. Because of a lack of funding, they are on the verge of closing. In 2022, the Liberals promised millions of dollars to Nunavut daycare. The funding is taking too long to make its way to Tumikulut Saipakivik daycare. Will the Liberals ensure Tumikulut
That's a great statement, Sandra. Please don't help Canadians anymore, Trudeau. You are killing us. Oh, this man has created such intense and incredible damage.
Of this government's policy of the past few years. We've worked closely with provinces and territories to make sure that money is delivered on the ground where it is needed the most. I will follow up on this particular case and make sure that the government of Nunavut is passing through the money and is accessing all the funds necessary so that childcare in the north and indeed right across the country continues to be delivered as the social program and economic program that it is.
The Honourable Member from Vancouver Centre.
Mr. Speaker, as a family doctor who delivered close to 500 babies, I am concerned about access to reproductive choice. Claiming to support reproductive choice is not enough. We must pass
Bloody
legislation
abortionist.
that
How many
makes it
babies
fully
did you
accessible
kill?
to all.
Delivered 500, you kill 1,000?
It will provide free
What a disgusting
contraception
woman.
to over 9 million
Petty
patients.
fries an abomination.
Unfortunately, our Conservative colleagues oppose it. They also oppose access to safe abortion. Will the Prime Minister reaffirm his government's promise to defend a woman's reproductive rights in spite of the opposition's
Well,
efforts
they love
to
this
deny
stupid.
it?
They love asking this
The Right
stupid
Honourable Prime Minister.
softball
Mr. Speaker, I
question
thank
every
the
day.
member for Vancouver
No,
Centre
yeah,
for
yeah.
decades of leadership. We will
Decades
always
of
support a woman's right to
disaster.
access reproductive health care, both in our words and in our policy. The Leader of the Opposition pretends to be pro-choice, but supports his Conservative caucus members tabling anti-abortion legislation. He cannot have it both ways. If the opposition leader truly believed in the right to choose, he'd condemn any effort to restrict reproductive choice and freedom,
Maybe he believes in freedom
including
of
from
speech, you
within
bloody
his own
halfwit.
caucus.
You are an abomination to this House of Commons and to this country. So sick of hearing your pained voice, seeing your
The Honourable
incredibly
Leader of the Opposition.
After 9 years of this prime minister, the cost of housing has doubled because of his inflationist spending and the bureaucracy that he's funding, which is preventing construction. In Le Soleil today, we learned that those who have not yet found a home for the coming year are panicking. And there's
Yeah,
a
of
major
course that
risk
question
that
was planned.
many people
She was
will
given that
be
question
forced
to ask.
to camp this summer because they can't find a home. Is this prime minister's plan, after doubling the cost of housing, to provide tents to people who are going to have to go camping because they can't find a home? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Well, I'm happy to be able to talk about our plan, which assures fairness for every generation. Our housing plan will build 3.87 million new housing units across the country by cutting bureaucracy, by changing
Just
zoning,
keep
and by
repeating your
lowering
talking
construction.
point. Karen Landry, you are right. I've been saying this for months. Not a single question about the Online Harms Act or the WHO Treaty. These are the issues that really matter. And what do? They talk about the weather. They talk about climate change incessantly. They talk about us all being so worried about climate change because we really believe it's associated and linked with increased bad weather. This is nonsense. The weather's no different than it ever has been. These people are crazy.
Spending of this prime minister. No surprise. What's surprising is that the Bloc voted for $500 billion of that spending. And, you know, this isn't the money that's already in the main estimates. This is money that's doubling fees for consultants, for example, including money for ArriveScam. Does the Bloc Liberal government realize that more money for the federal government means less money for Quebecers? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Once again, Mr. Speaker, we see the Conservative leader completely ignoring facts and data in all of the rhetorical arguments that he's putting forward. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is that the inflation, which has hit the entire planet, hurt Canada less than many other countries. And now, over the last 4 months, inflation has gone down because of the investments and because of the sound, responsible financial management of our government. We will continue to be there to invest in Canadians while lowering inflation. That's what he doesn't understand.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, inflation in housing is worse in Canada than in any other G7 country. It's the second worst of the 40 OECD countries. But the question was about inflationary spending and centralizing spending that the Bloc continues to vote for. The Bloc Québécois has become a socialist party that wants to increase the size of the government, but they're focused on the federal government. So that means a bigger federal state and less autonomy and money for Quebecers. And why is it only the Conservatives who are defending Quebecers?
I'm so sick of
the
any
Right
of these
Honourable Prime
defending
Minister.
Quebecers.
Now, Mr. Speaker, we all remember what these Conservatives do when it comes to Quebec. We saw the cuts to social health services and healthcare. We saw the cuts in the health transfer. We saw the cuts to arts and culture, Mr. Speaker. The Conservatives are standing up today to attack the Bloc Québécois for not properly defending Quebec. Well, that's ridiculous, Mr. Speaker. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is that the Bloc is to defend Quebecers. They do it less well than the federal government can do it, but the attacks from the Conservatives against Quebecers are a bit ridiculous, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Well, here, the Liberal Bloc Party. A beautiful coalition, a beautiful coalition. Now the Prime Minister, the so-called Federalist Prime Minister, says that the Bloc defends Quebecers. What? What? And the Bloc is voting for centralizing spending here in Ottawa. What?
That's a good
point.
point.
What is going on here? Everything is confused, Mr. Speaker. Isn't it time?
No kidding. It's a dysfunctional parliament.
Forget this ridiculous coalition and replace it with a Conservative government that has a lot of common sense?
At least it will be functional. This is a dysfunctional parliament. The separatists in league with federalists, with the socialist NDP propping up the Liberals.
Speaker, apparently, unlike the leader of the Conservatives, I believe fundamentally that every member in this House is there to defend the interests of the people who elected them. That is our individual responsibility and collective responsibility. And every person here in this House is doing that. Yes, people know very well that I disagree with the ultimate goal of the Bloc Québécois. But at the same time, we can certainly find moments where we can work together with respect to protect the French language, to create economic growth in Quebec. We are there to work together, not to play political games and to just attack everyone. That's what the Conservatives are here to do.
What a bad act you are.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, in the Western St. Lawrence Gulf, there's only one fishery that's open. That's crustaceans, crab, and lobsters. All the other fisheries are closed or in crisis. However, the member for Gaspésie and the Minister of Fisheries is closing all kinds of fishery areas throughout the region. What is the Prime Minister saying to fishers who have to go back home to port and who are seeing another fishing season disappear in front of their eyes? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, we understand the distress and the challenges that fishers are facing in Eastern Canada. We're seeing a very difficult moment because of climate change.
You don't understand
because
anything.
of changing and diminishing maritime populations. We are going to be there to support the fishers, but part of being there to support them is also protecting our international markets and filling out our scientific responsibilities and in respecting international law. We are going to be there to help the fishers, and we are also going to be there to protect endangered species and our trade agreements in the future. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, I'll give him another chance, Mr. Speaker. It's because of the right whales that the fishery areas are closed. Everyone wants to protect the whales, but the government is threatening them by opening up new areas for oil exploration. Fishers scientists, the Bloc Québécois, have proposed some ideas. The department's not listening, the minister isn't listening, and the fishing sector is facing an unprecedented crisis. Does the Prime Minister believe that fishers should respect the minister? Does he have trust in the minister? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are working closely with industry, with scientists, and with our international partners to manage a very, very difficult situation. We understand the extent to which this is a difficult situation for fishers, and we are going to continue to be there for them. And we are going to make sure that the decisions that we're taking are going to respect the interest of the industry and also the environment, obviously, and will protect endangered species. It's a very complex issue, Mr. Speaker, but we're going to be there not with simplistic solutions, but with the necessary support to ensure the long-term success of our resource. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. After 9 years of this Prime Minister and the Bloc Québécois, Canadians are exhausted. They don't have any money left in their pockets, and many are hungry. They need vacations, but it's too expensive. The Prime Minister has doubled the national
to go to the
debt.
grocery store.
That has increased the price of everything. Interest rates have gone up as well. So that's why the Conservatives, the common sense Conservatives, are proposing a vacation on gas and diesel taxes to allow Quebecers to have a break. Will the Prime Minister have the common sense to accept this great idea? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Quebecers know too well what happens when the Conservatives bring in austerity measures when it comes to affordability and the cost of living. That's why we will continue to invest in families. We will continue to be there to help seniors. We will continue to be there to help children with a school food program. We are going to be there to create more daycare spaces. All of these are proposals that the Conservatives have voted against. They will cut in social programs, cut social services, cut help for families, because of their ideology of austerity. We'll be there for Quebecers and Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The NDP Liberal Prime Minister has implemented a wacko and radical drug decriminalization and handout program. He's literally handed out tax-funded opioids. The result has been tragic, a nearly tripling in the number of overdose deaths. And where the policy has been most deeply implemented, in BC, a 300% increase in overdose deaths. Prime Minister did a last-minute reversal on decriminalization in that province, only to vote back in favor of decriminalization yesterday. Isn't it his plan to decriminalize across Canada if he's re-elected?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, The fact is, we will continue to be there responsibly on a science-based, evidence-based approach that works with jurisdictions on the tools they need to counter the growing opioid and toxic drug epidemic. I understand the ideological desire by Conservatives to simply look at every problem as if it's a nail because all they have is a hammer. We're going to continue to be there investing in community supports. We're going to be there to continue to work with jurisdictions who want to help people struggling with addictions, and we will continue to be there to ground in science and evidence.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Imagine you're a young couple in a hospital welcoming your newborn into the world, and all of a sudden you smell meth or crack smoke coming down the hallway. That was the reality up until just a few weeks ago in British Columbia, when because the Prime Minister and the NDP had decriminalized crack. And if those parents had asked the nurse to stop it, they would have said, no, that can't happen. These drug uses are now legal. We're introducing the Safe Hospitals Act to ban all hard drugs from hospitals. Will the Prime Minister support it? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, to be clear, those things are already illegal in hospitals. We know that nurses and hospital staff need to feel safe in their work environment, and it's our government that has invested billions of dollars into the healthcare system to ensure Canadians have access to the best care possible, and support goes to our frontline health workers. The important difference between the Conservative Party and us is that while they look to criminalize the most vulnerable struggling with addictions, we are rolling up our sleeves and working with all levels of government to put an end to this crisis and help these most vulnerable Canadians.
Rolling up your sleeves. All you are is a string of cliches.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Pathetic,
For many, costs are an obstacle that prevent access to health care, particularly when it comes to reproductive health care. The right to access to an abortion is threatened in Canada by the March Against Abortion, which took place here in Ottawa, encouraged and followed by Conservative members who promised again to restrict access to health care. Young people here in Ottawa Vanier are worried. They want to know, what is the government doing to fight against these threats on the rights of women? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, I'd like to thank the member for Ottawa Vanier for her very hard work and her leadership.
What leadership?
Across
what
the way,
hard
the Conservative
work?
members are proposing anti-choice legislation. They participate in rallies against abortion, and the Conservative leader
you have to believe like you,
refuses to
we have
oppose
to
his
believe like you, or else
caucus,
we're going to go to jail.
voted with them on a bill
You are a
that
disgrace
would
for
have
democracy. What an imbecile
classified
to
the
have
fetus
as a prime
as
minister.
a person.
I am
Women
just
have the
so
right to
sick of
choose,
listening
and
to you.
that's why
Reading
we
your
are
script,
making contraceptives, prescription
you've got to
contraceptives
support
free,
abortion
and we will continue to
on
defend the
demand,
right to choose.
anytime, anywhere,
The Honourable Leader
24/7.
of the Opposition.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal Prime Minister's
I'm sick of
wacko
it.
crime policies, extortions are up 218%.
How many times did he say wacko today?
263%
Probably
in Ontario,
15 times now.
roughly the same in Alberta, and roughly 400% in British Columbia. The Prime Minister passed a law that would allow extortionists out of jail faster after they've used a gun. Will he reverse himself and support my common sense Conservative Deputy Leader's bill to crack down on extortionists and put them in behind bars to stop the crime?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the problem with the Conservative leader's approach on crime is it consistently gets struck down by the courts. That's what we saw through 8 years of Stephen Harper, which actually led Canadians worse off than before. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, our approach on cracking down on criminals while at the same time making sure our communities are safer by strengthening the gun laws that Conservatives are continually voting against in the pocket of the gun lobby is not keeping Canadians safe. That's why we work with the provinces on bail reforms that are going to make sure we're keeping Canadians safe while making sure we're charter compliant.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was not forced by the courts to allow career car thefts to do their sentences in their living rooms, playing Grand Theft Auto. He chose to do that through his bill C5, He chose to bring in catch and release bail through C-75. He chose to pass a law allowing Paul Bernardo out of Mac's pen. Mr. Speaker, now he can make another choice. Instead of trying to ban Grandpa Joe's hunting rifle, will he put extortionists who use machine guns in jail?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has continually pledged to make assault-style weapons legal again. We have banned them for the past 4 years, and we will continue to make sure that they stay banned in this country, while the Leader of the Opposition wants to bring back assault-style weapons to our communities and to Canadians from coast to coast. That's not how to keep this community safer. On top of that, Mr. Speaker, in the name of protecting Canadians from crime, he's willing to suspend their fundamental freedoms by using the notwithstanding clause to override the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That's not responsible, and it makes you wonder, what other rights is he going to come after on Canadians?
Maybe not like the ones you've gone after, like basic fundamental rights of freedom of speech, freedom of assembly.
Style assault rifles have been banned since the 70s. The Prime Minister held a press conference with a big scary gun on the front of his podium 4 years ago, and still hasn't been able to figure out how to ban that scary-looking cartoon gun, with 1,500 guns under amnesty to this day. And he says he won't be able to figure out how to do it for at least another 3 years. So, will the Prime Minister stop his made in Hollywood approach to crime and actually lock up the hard criminals so that we can stop the crime?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, for the past 4 years, it has been illegal to buy, sell, or use assault-style weapons in this country, and that is exactly what the Conservative leader has promised to overturn if he gets elected to government in this country. The reality is he wants to bring back assault-style weapons in this country after we banned them back in 2000. We're going to continue to be there to make sure Canadians are safe while he stays in the pocket of the gun lobby. That's not what Canadians want. That's not even what Conservative Canadians want, but he's going to do it anyway.
The Honourable Member from Davenport.
Mr. Speaker, while our government works to provide pharmacare, expand childcare, introduce a national school food program, and build housing, Conservative MPs are giving speeches at anti-abortion rallies. Reproductive health is health.
Incredible.
Women
Incredible
have the
how
right
they
to
can
choose
keep
when
repeating
and
this
if
stupid
they start a
question.
family. With members of this
What a
House,
bunch of morons.
threatening to take this right away from Canadians.
You don't
what
have
is this
it's not a
government
right
doing
in the
to
Constitution,
strengthen
airhead
reproductive
woman.
rights?
It's not in the Charter of Rights.
Prime Minister.
What an idiot.
Mr. Speaker, the member for Davenport is right. Reproductive health is health, and abortion is health care. The leader of the opposition pretends to care about freedom, but whose freedom was he defending? By threatening to suspend Canadians' charter rights, by voting to restrict abortion, or by removing the right to vote from thousands of Canadians when he was Minister of Democratic Institutions. That is the very opposite of freedom. We will never back down from defending all Canadians' fundamental rights and freedoms.
Bullshit. You put people in jail, you sick the police on them, you freeze their bank accounts, you call them misogynist and racist, you swine.
2 years after the
I am
illegal
so sick
border
of this
blockade
bastard
at
today.
Ambassador Bridge, the Liberals are stiffing the city of Windsor by not paying back the city for costs for handling this mess. Canadians are used to being ripped off by big grocery stores and big telecoms, but now they can add the Liberals to that list. And where were the Conservatives while this happened?
Get off
on
the
the
stage,
sidelines,
bloody
cheering on this
hypocrite.
harm.
Then
Mr.
stop
Speaker, the
sucking
Prime
up to this
Minister asked
government.
Windsor
Then if
to
you
protect
hate
our
it so
country,
much,
so
do
why is he
something
rewarding
about it,
this
but you
attack on
won't.
the economy, public safety,
This
and
is a
frontline workers
dysfunctional
by
parliament,
not
a
paying Windsor
dysfunctional
back the
country.
money that they're owed.
It is beyond
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
redemption right
Mr.
now.
Speaker, the member knows full well that we paid back a significant amount of the costs incurred by the City of Windsor during the Conservative-supported convoy. There is a matter of a dispute around whether those legal fees were to be covered by the federal
During the
government.
Conservative-supported convoy.
Minister of Public Safety
Yeah, the
is
one
meeting,
that brought
with the
down
Mayor
your
of Windsor
damn
tomorrow, and
COVID
I'm sure that'll
mandates.
be on the discussion.
You little
In the meanwhile,
dictator.
we've continued to stand up for Windsor with historic investments in jobs and opportunities for Windsorites that, quite frankly, Conservatives continue to stand against, while we will continue to be there for the people of Windsor.
The honourable member from Kitchener Centre.
Mr. Speaker, earlier this week, the University Network for Human Rights published a 100-page report concluding that Israel's actions in Gaza constitute genocide. Now, the International Criminal Court's chief prosecutor is seeking arrest warrants for both Hamas terrorists and Israeli leaders. There's no equivalency being made. These individuals may simply be accused of breaking international law, which the court is tasked to uphold. Will the PM support the ICC's process, as is the will of this Parliament from March 18th?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, obviously we're closely monitoring the processes as they unfold at the ICC. We respect the independence of the court. There is no equivalence between Israel and Hamas. One is a state, the other is a terrorist organization. As we said from the beginning, all parties have a necessary obligation to comply with international law. In the meanwhile, an immediate ceasefire is urgently needed, and a lot more humanitarian aid needs to get in, and hostages need to be released. We will continue to stand for a two-state solution. We will continue to call for peace in the region.
Colleagues, that is the end of question period, but I wish to draw to the attention of members in the gallery.
Wow. That was tough going today, folks. I'm sure you noticed. It was just tough going. Sometimes you wonder if there's any hope for this country. I mean, I believe there is, but it's certainly not in question period. And as I said, they talk about such useless, baseless, unimportant matters in question period, with the government still trying to convince us that the weather has changed at all. And it's changed because of climate change, and that wildfires have nothing to do with arsonists, and that if there's any kind of difference in the weather, it's got to be directly a result of climate change. I'm so sick of hearing those two words, climate change. I'm sick of them. I don't want to hear them from the mouth of this moronic prime minister anymore. I just want him to shut up. I'm sick of hearing his voice. I'm sick of hearing his script. I'm sick of hearing him read his same talking points over and over and over again ad nauseum. I'm sick of his hypocrisy. I'm sick of him telling us that he cares about freedom and he's concerned about Pierre Poilievre destroying freedom when he's destroyed freedom and he's doing it right now. I'm sick of an opposition party that doesn't want to talk about the WHO pandemic agreement, that doesn't want to raise the online harms bill, that doesn't want to talk about digital currency, that doesn't want to talk about digital ID, that doesn't want to talk about anything except food banks and cars being stolen and the carbon tax. That's all they want to talk about. And let me tell you, it is a circus without end and at times without meaning. Anyway, we're going to keep persevering and fighting. Resolve to resist with me, folks. We'll be back again tomorrow with more. If you can stand it, I can. Bye-bye.